So let's start with, and then we're going to talk about her book, by the way, Becoming a Grandma. Let's start with your coverage of presidents, because there's so much rich material here to mine, particularly about the culture of the presidency. And I wanted to start by asking you, we hear a lot about Trump's war on the press. And in fact, in an interview, he described to you how this is actually a strategy. But a lot of us who know history also know that a president like Richard Nixon also had somewhat of a war on the press. Talk about how you would compare the two.
Nixon?
And Trump, on that. Just on that.
Well, Nixon really did come after the press. A lot of reporters were on his enemies list. But he sent the vice president out to do the attacking. And nattering nabobs of negativism was something Vice President Agnew used to go around the country and say. Nixon expressed his oozing hatred of the press in news conferences, just by the way he dealt with various reporters. And he did have us as a target, but it wasn't overtly, he didn't have a cudgel out there slamming away himself the way this president does. And I think that Nixon's hatred of the press was very personal. I think this president really seems to be wanting to destroy our credibility, destroy the institution. And I think he's having an effect.
But he suggested to you there's method in this madness. Yes. In what way?
I'm surprised. Sorry, I'm going to move here. Oh, I can take it off.
I was wondering. I was having.
It's so good.
Yes. Yeah. So. That's known as a costume change.
That's my wardrobe assistant.
Wardrobe change. Yes.
Well, I think that. I'm sorry. I think that well, he told me that he attacks the press so that when we write negative things about him, the public won't believe him, of course. And I'm struck by how many times I think maybe he's a little out of control and then find out that there is a reason why he is attacking the way he is. For example, when he mocked Blasey Ford just last night at that rally, I wake up this morning, turn on Morning Joe, and find out that there are polls saying that it's actually helping Republican candidates in red states when you support Kavanaugh. So he's got polls.
Well, I predict that there is going to be, by the way, a Republican backlash, and that it's going to help Republicans in the midterms.
There's a poll that says that.
Yeah.
So yeah. Well, Democrats in red states are seeing their ratings go down as the Kavanaugh hearings have progressed. So there's a method to it. And I thought, oh my God, they were trying to keep the president from attacking her. And he's out of control, but not out of control.
So you and I had this fascinating conversation yesterday about how the personality of a president very much infuses the functioning of a White House. We touched on Nixon, but let's talk about a couple other administrations, the Carter administration, for example.
Well, Jimmy Carter. How many of you are grandmothers? Very few? I'm just trying to get the age group I'm talking to, because you all were little babies when Jimmy Carter was president. But he came in with a very, very young team from Georgia, and everything was a crisis. Everything was a crisis. The lights in the White House were on all night long. Whatever popped up, they were rattled by it. And the whole country got rattled, because not only within the White House, but the whole country was affected by this. And then Reagan came in, and Reagan was about to be 70, and he had learned, as you do when you turn 70, that this too shall pass. And, you know, I'm going to go to bed early with Mommy. She did. He would leave the White House, you know, at a normal time when I would like to leave the office and go home and come to work around 9:30. And things just calmed down. and they calmed down all around the country.
So the country breathed a sigh of relief.
Yeah, we did. Well, we were affected by his personality. Jerry Ford was normal, down-to-earth, low-key. It just settled down. And the same thing happened after Nixon, after Watergate. Nixon was absolutely brilliant, but he was agitated. He was filled with loathing. He had vendettas. The country was like it is now. It was polarized. People disliked each other based on their political views. And he goes away. And I guess I talked about Jerry Ford. He came in. I'm lost. Jerry Ford came in after Nixon and settled everything down in a second. In a second. It was astonishing. So what I learned was that the president's temperament, the way he goes about his life in terms of his outlook, personality, affects all of us. It affects us culturally and sociologically.
And it's so true in what you're seeing now. Let's turn a bit, since we're short on time, to your book. Now, what I love about this book is that you started it out of a passion you have for your grandchildren, and you've been going on all morning about your conversation with your 7-year-old in LA yesterday. I love your passion for your grandkids. But of course, being the fantastic reporter you are, you turned it into a reporting exercise.
Well, yeah.
And talk a little bit about the importance of grandparents. Tell me about the foster care community that you were telling me about yesterday.
Okay. Well, it really is a reporter's journey, because I was so filled with emotion and change when I held my first grandchild in my arms. You know how you hear it's the best thing that can happen to a woman? Well, it is. It just is. And I was so confused about the physicality of the change in me that I decided to write the book. And as I wrote, I kept coming upon fascinating little tidbits about our physiology and about different communities. And there's one in Rantoul, Illinois, this fabulous woman who was writing her PhD thesis on the foster care system, was appalled at how children were being shunted and rejected from family to family to family. And she developed this sort of utopian community where people would get beautiful houses and kind of a stipend if they would adopt children out of the foster care system, but whole families. They had to take sisters and brothers. And she went to the Air Force and said, "You're closing Rantoul, this Air Force base. Give me 24 houses, beautiful houses, and just give it to me." And they said, okay, okay. They gave her 90 houses because they couldn't split up this neighborhood, so she got 90 houses. And she had to fill all the ones outside of the 24 families that adopted these children. So she filled them with seniors. And organically, they became the grandparents. Just organically. All the seniors' health improved because they became involved in saving these really disturbed children who had been abused, psychologically, physically, all of it. And they were helping these kids get through school, the seniors. And they were helping the parents who often couldn't cope because these children were disruptive, and it was the most...
And they would come in, because of their stature as grandparents and just their experience, they would come in and settle these kids, even in classrooms. And a lot of times the men, the grandfathers,
yes,
would come in and settle them just because they were able to bring that sense of stability and
calmness.
calm.
When you get a little older, you do calm. This too shall pass. Boom, it goes down. And here's something else I found out. That the older you get, the happier you get. And it is true. I'm here to tell you the truth. I wanted to...
Questions?
I wanted to say two things.
Get your questions ready for Lesley Stahl.
Okay, I wanted to say two things.
Go ahead.
One, while I was watching Morning Joe this morning, I was thinking, came flashing into my mind about something I heard as the Berlin Wall was coming down. And the Soviet Union, the communist system, was defeated. And I was in Moscow, and there was a man named Georgy Arbatov, I don't remember any names, but that one, I like that name, Georgi Arbatov. And he said to a group of Americans, your society is now going to fall apart because so much of America, the idea of America in the 20th century, was based on having us as your enemy. And you won't have an enemy now. And you think you're good because you think we're evil. So every self-perception was based on us versus them. Mm-hmm. And you won't have us anymore. You won't have your enemy, and you're going to crumble as a society. And I keep wondering, is that what is happening to us? You know, we don't have something to bring us together that's huge, that matters, that we're afraid of. Mm-hmm. So that was one thought. Well, I guess we talked about the other. The other one was really about how much of our own prejudices we bring now to events, tribal prejudices. And we women mustn't forget how we were with Bill Clinton. We must remember in our heads our own prejudices when Monica Lewinsky came to the fore and we sided with Bill Clinton. And so we can't forget how we perceived the issue then to understand really what's happening now.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah,
it is very tribal, the reaction to some of these issues. Questions? Because I'll just keep going if you go, okay, Jen.
Thanks. First of all, Lesley, you are so beautiful, and I loved your book. But your wisdom, Jan Fields, I'm sorry. But, I mean, it's amazing to hear the things that you remember and can tell these stories. I wish you'd write another on presidents.
I did.
You did?
I did. It's called Reporting Live.
And where is it?
You can probably get it on Amazon.
You can get it on Amazon.
I'll be damned. I didn't know that.
I wrote a whole book about the presidents.
But it's just so interesting because the Bill Clinton, but you've always done everything from a position as a reporter and not one side or the other. So I just had to call you out for the fantastic things you've done.
I'll tell you one of my favorite stories covering the White House. So Nancy Reagan becomes First Lady, and her color was red. And the woman who was our radio editor in the CBS booth in the White House, she was having her bathroom retiled. And her tiler was taken off the job because Nancy wanted the bathroom in the White House retiled. So he's now retiling the Reagan bathroom. And he overhears this astonishing conversation. Barbara Bush arrives because she and Nancy are going to host a luncheon for the congressional wives. And he hears all of it. So in walks Barbara in red. Oh. And Nancy says, Barbara, that's my color.
I love it.
And Barbara says, oh, well, what do you want me to do? And Nancy says, I want you to go home and change. Barbara went home and changed.
I love it.
It became Barbara Blue, if you all remember.
Yeah, devil with the blue dress on. I'm going to let one more question. I'm going to executive privilege here because I know we're out of time, but I think we deserve one more question. Go ahead.
Ms. Stahl, yesterday a lot of the discussion was about sexual harassment and the Me Too moment. And obviously, CBS is very much a part of this discussion.
Boy, I was hoping I wasn't going to get that.
I am a journalist. I can't let you go past that. I wanted you to speak specifically to the CBS News culture and that of 60 Minutes, which has just seen the departure of Jeff Hager.
This is my nightmare. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, it has been very painful. And as a woman, when it hits home, it's so confusing. I think there have been men who have been accused and their careers ruined, completely ruined, destroyed, crushed, and they're not Harvey Weinstein. You know, they're Al Franken, or they're my boss. my ex-boss. And I'm struck by how there's no sliding scale. And we need to think that we have to build some nuance in. I mean, there are absolute cases of rape, attempted rape, perpetual assaults, predatory. They're obviously predators. And over here, there's a category that doesn't need to have their lives destroyed. And so this is my emotional feelings about what's going on. It's been very hard.
Thank you so much.